Close your eyes for a moment. Now, who just decided to close them? And who's listening to these words right now? There's someone in there, isn't there? A narrator, a decider, a you that feels completely real and undeniable. But what if I told you that the greatest scientific minds, ancient mystics, and modern neuroscientists have all discovered the same shocking truth? That narrator in your head, the very essence of what you call you, is the essence of what you call you, is the most sophisticated illusion your brain has ever created. This isn't philosophy. This isn't wishful thinking. This is about to shatter everything you believe about reality itself. Right now, your brain is performing the most incredible magic trick in the universe. It's creating the feeling of being you, a continuous, solid self that wakes up in the same body every morning, remembers yesterday, and plans for tomorrow. But here's what's actually happening. Every millisecond, billions of neurons are firing in patterns, creating thoughts, sensations, and memories that have no central observer. There's no little person in your head watching the show. There's just the show itself. 2,500 years ago, a prince named Siddhartha had this exact realization, and it was so profound, so earth-shattering, that millions of people have spent their entire lives trying to recapture that moment of So now. But you don't need to sit under a tree for 6 years. Science has caught up to ancient wisdom, and what we've discovered will change how you see yourself forever. Let's start with your brain right now. MIT neuroscientist Dr. Christoph Koch has spent decades mapping consciousness, and here's what he found that will blow your mind. There is no central location in your brain where you exist. Think about it. You have a visual cortex processing what you see, an auditory cortex handling sounds, memory centers storing experiences, and emotional regions generating feelings. But where exactly is the you that's supposedly experiencing all of this? Neuroscientist Dr. Antonio Damasio put it perfectly. The self is a repeatedly reconstructed biological state. Every moment, your brain is rebuilding the illusion of being you from scratch. You're not watching your thoughts, you are the watching, constantly recreated by neural patterns that have no permanent center. Here's where it gets wild. Patients who've had their brain hemispheres surgically separated for medical reasons have given us the most disturbing glimpse into the nature of self. Dr. C. Michael Gazzaniga's research with split brain patients shows something incredible. When you isolate the brain's hemispheres, you get two separate streams of consciousness in one skull. One hemisphere can be shown a word the other can't see, and they'll have completely different responses, sometimes contradictory ones. Which one is the real self? The answer is neither, and both. The self is just whatever story the brain is telling itself in that moment. Here's the smoking gun from neuroscience. There's a network in your brain called the default mode network, the DMN. This is literally your brain's self-generator, constantly spinning the story of you when you're not focused on specific tasks. Dr. Judson Brewer's research at Yale shows that this network is hyperactive in depression, anxiety, and rumination. Why? Because it's working overtime to maintain an increasingly fragile story of self. The more you try to figure out who you are, the more suffering you create. But here's the kicker. When people meditate deeply, the DMN quiets down. And that's when they report feeling most peaceful, most creative, most alive. Not because they've improved their self, but because they've temporarily stepped out of the illusion entirely. Want proof of how flimsy your sense of self really is? Scientists can make you feel like a rubber hand is part of your body in just 10 minutes. In the rubber hand illusion, researchers hide your real hand and place a rubber hand where you can see it. Then they stroke both hands simultaneously. Within minutes, your brain starts identifying with the fake hand. When they threaten the rubber hand with a knife, you flinch and your stress hormones spike. If your brain can be tricked into identifying with a piece of rubber that quickly, how solid is your identification with your thoughts, your personality, your entire sense of being you? Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin has been scanning the brains of meditators for decades. What he found in advanced practitioners is extraordinary. The areas of the brain associated with self-referential thinking show dramatically reduced activity. These aren't people who've become vegetables. They're often more creative, more effective, more emotionally stable than the general population. They simply learned to function without the constant background noise of "what about me? How does this affect me?" What do I need to do to maintain my identity? One Tibetan monk, Mingyur Rinpoche, showed gamma wave activity 700 times stronger than normal during compassion meditation. His brain was literally rewiring itself to operate from a place beyond the separate self. Developmental psychologist Dr. Alison Gopnik has discovered something remarkable about children. Very young children, before age 3 or 4, don't have a solid sense of self. They exist in what she calls lantern consciousness, a wide open awareness taking in everything without the filter of me. As the brain develops self-referential thinking, this natural openness narrows into flashlight consciousness, focused, goal-oriented, but also more anxious and limited. We literally train ourselves out of our natural state of selfless awareness. The recent renaissance in psychedelic research has provided unprecedented insight into the nature of self. Dr. Robin Carr-Harris at Imperial College London has shown that psilocybin and LSD specifically reduce activity in the default mode network, the brain's self-generator. Subjects report profound experiences of ego dissolution, the temporary disappearance of the sense of being a separate self. And remarkably, these experiences often lead to lasting improvements in depression, anxiety, and overall well-being. Why? Because they provide direct experiential proof that the self is a construction, not a fixed reality. Let's do something right now that will give you a direct taste of what we're talking about. Point to where you think you are located. Most people point to their head or chest. Now, turn that finger around and point to what's pointing. What are you actually pointing at? You can point to your thoughts, your feelings, your body, your memories, but what's aware of all of these things? What's looking at the looker? The harder you search, the more obvious it becomes. There's nothing there to find. That's not a problem to solve. That's the solution itself. William James, the father of American psychology, described consciousness as a stream. But modern neuroscience reveals something more radical. There is no stream. There are just discrete moments of awareness arising and passing away so rapidly that they create the illusion of continuity. It's like a movie, 24 frames per second, creating the appearance of smooth motion. Your sense of being a continuous self is just consciousness flickering on and off, so fast that your brain creates a story of permanence. Dr. Francisco Varela's research showed that consciousness occurs in discrete moments lasting about 100 milliseconds each. Between these moments, nothing. No self, no experience, no continuity. Just gaps that your brain fills in with the story of you. Here's something that will completely reframe how you see yourself and others. Mirror neurons, discovered by Dr. Giacomo Rizzolatti, fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. Your brain literally simulates other people's experiences as if they were your own. The boundaries between self and other are far more fluid than you imagine. When you see someone get hurt, your pain centers actually activate. When you watch someone smile, your facial muscles subtly mimic the expression. The separate self isn't just an illusion. It's a harmful illusion that obscures our fundamental interconnectedness. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states reveals something profound. During peak performance, whether in sports, arts, or any activity, people report the same thing: the disappearance of self-consciousness. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists describe getting out of their own way. Musicians talk about the music playing itself. In these moments, there's no separate self trying to perform. There's just the activity itself, happening spontaneously and perfectly. This isn't a special state you achieve. It's what naturally emerges when the illusion of separation temporarily dissolves. Anthropologist Dr. Richard Schroeder has studied how different cultures construct the self. What he found is startling. The Western notion of an independent, autonomous self is actually quite rare globally and historically. Many cultures see the self as fundamentally relational, existing only in connection with family, community, and environment. Some languages don't even have words for I or me as separate entities. The hyper-individualistic self that Western culture promotes isn't just psychologically harmful, it's anthropologically abnormal. Even physics is catching up to this ancient insight. Quantum mechanics shows us that at the most fundamental level, Reality isn't made of separate things, but of relationships and processes. Physicist Dr. Carlo Rovelli argues that objects don't exist independently. They exist only in relation to observers. There's no absolute perspective, no fundamental thingness to anything, including you. The boundaries you draw around yourself as a separate entity are as arbitrary as the boundaries you might draw around a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool seems separate, but it's just the river doing what rivers do. Here's something beautiful that emerges from seeing through the self-illusion. Genuine compassion naturally arises. Dr. Kristen Neff's research shows that self-compassion, treating yourself with kindness rather than harsh self-judgment, is more effective for psychological well-being than self-esteem. But when you realize there's no separate self to be compassionate toward, something even more profound happens. The artificial barriers between your suffering and others' suffering dissolve. Compassion becomes not something you practice, but something you are. Perhaps the most liberating realization is about death itself. What you call death is just the end of a story your brain has been telling. But what you actually are, this aware presence, was never born and cannot die. Near-death experience researcher, Dr. Kenneth Ring, has found that people who've had profound NDs often report the same insight. They realized they were never their body, never their thoughts, never their personality. They were the awareness in which all of that appeared. Death becomes not the end of you, but the end of the illusion of you. When you stop making decisions from the perspective of what's best for me, something remarkable happens. Decisions become clearer, more spontaneous, more appropriate to each situation. Instead of the paralysis of endless self-analysis, you respond from a deeper intelligence, the intelligence of the whole situation rather than one imaginary part of it. Every relationship problem you've ever had stems from two separate selves trying to get something from each other. When the illusion of separation dissolves, relationships become about connection rather than transaction. You stop asking, what can I get from this person? And start responding to, what does this moment require? Creativity never comes from the self. It flows through the absence of self-interference. Every artist, writer, or inventor knows the experience of getting out of their own way and letting something create itself through them. When you're not protecting and promoting a fictional character, you become a clear channel for whatever wants to emerge. Anxiety is always about a self that needs protecting. Social anxiety, performance anxiety, existential anxiety, they all stem from the belief that there's a you that could be damaged, judged, or threatened. When you see that this you is just a thought arising in awareness, anxiety often simply evaporates. There's no one there to be anxious. Right now, as you're absorbing these words, notice what's happening. There are thoughts arising, perhaps some resistance, maybe some recognition. But what's aware of all of this mental activity? Don't think about it, just notice. What's looking at your thoughts right now? What's aware of being aware? That's it. That's what you are. Not the content of awareness, but awareness itself. Not the waves on the ocean, but the ocean in which waves appear and disappear. This isn't something you need to achieve or develop. It's what's always been true. The clouds of thoughts and sensations come and go, but the sky of awareness remains unchanged. The self is humanity's most persistent and necessary illusion. Necessary because it allows you to function in the world, persistent because your brain is designed to maintain it. But it's still an illusion. You are not who you think you are. You're not the story, not the narrator, not the character trying to improve itself. You're the vast open awareness in which all stories appear and dissolve. This isn't the end of your life, it's the beginning of actually living. Not as a separate fragment trying to complete itself, but as the wholeness that was never actually broken. The next time someone asks, "Who are you?" you'll smile, knowing the beautiful secret. There's nobody there to answer, and that's the most liberating truth you'll ever discover. If this points you towards something beyond words, something you can't quite grasp with your thinking mind, then it's done its job. Share this with someone ready to question the most fundamental assumption they've ever made about themselves. Because the self is a myth. But what's reading these words right now? That's the only reality there is.